All right, going to do Chapter 5 today on key franchising policies. Okay, so there's 4 types of policies. Rules of ownership to franchise outlets, and that's pretty much that FDD. You're going to define the rules in there. Right mechanisms to make sure franchisees act in the best interest of the franchise system. And one of the things, and I'll talk about it as we go through this, the first and to me the most important thing is that franchisees got to be profitable. If you strangle them and run these sales and do pricing such that they can't make any money, then they're not going to protect the brand. Third thing, correct term for a franchise agreement. How long, what's the renewal plan, and then the appropriate policy of advertising, both national and local. And I've got a couple stories on Subway on their national advertising. And I think I may have mentioned it, and this article is a little bit dated, but there was $600 million in their advertising trust fund. That's a lot of money, and that's why you see them with their advertising. They're all over the place, but they have, 7,000 stores all paying a percentage in, and
Company?
Subway. It's the parent company is called Doctors. I don't know if you've heard their commercials, Doctors Inc. That's like the corporation that owns Subway, the brand name Subway. Yes?
When I saw that number, I just thought there's no way that they can run that much advertising dollars for a month or something. So at what point do franchisees look at that and say, we can tone down the percentage?
But they once you sign that license agreement,
right,
then you can't. But Subway should not, and that's the contention of this lawsuit, be able to spend that money on anything but advertising. But you're right. If I'm sitting up there and I'm Doctors Inc. and some of my guys are struggling, I might cut that advertising for a month or 2 months or something and throw the franchisees a bone. But that's why this whole relationship with Subway and franchisees is not good.
Is that where the money comes from to pay like athletes and stuff?
Yeah, any kind of endorsements you do, like the whole Jared campaign and all those. Yes, all those people are paid out of that advertising.
I thought you said the issue was that they were advertising like the specials that the franchisees to be able to advertise. They can advertise anything with that money.
And once again, that's why I want you guys to talk to a franchisee, and you need to study that FDD. In there, it will specify who controls that advertising dollars. And that was the whole deal with Subway, that they took it to court because, and remember the guy from Pinch a Penny, what he said? He said they had a 10-person council of franchisees that rotated, that were elected, that sat down with the company and decided kind of what they were going to do. That's what you want. If I'm a franchisee, I want some kind of representation in that, because if not, and let me give you another good example, Burger King, you guys all know them. Franchisees sued the hamburger company this week over a $1 double cheeseburger promotion, saying they're losing money on the deal and the company can't set maximum menu prices. National Franchise Association, that represents more than 80% of Burger King's U.S. franchise, said the dollar promotion forces restaurants to sell the quarter-pound burger with at least a 10-cent loss. And after testing the dollar deal in markets across the country, the burger went on sale nationwide, even though franchise owners who operate 90% of the 12,000 locations twice rejected the product because of its expense. And the Burger King just basically said that they don't think the litigation is the litigation's without merit, and an earlier appeals court already ruled that the company had a right to require franchisee participation in its value menu promotion. So it's a lot of this may end up in court. Now, the one thing I do know is they can't force you to set prices. My pricing was mine, and it makes sense. Think about the airport. What do you pay for a Big Mac in an airport? Probably $5 or something. Well, in a small town, you can't charge that. So there needs to be some flexibility. But when in this, it sounds like Burger King had already gone to court earlier, and the court ruled that if we have a value menu, you must participate in that. So that's why you got to do your homework before you go in.
Wouldn't that be setting the price though?
It may be because it's the value menu that's a component that they're able to set the price in. And if you're going to be a Burger King, if you're going to be a Wendy's, we require you to have a value menu. McDonald's now, almost everybody has a value menu, and that may be just something that they can require you to have. That's why you got to do your homework. Who's going to have control? I knew going into Hardee's that I was going to have no control over my regional advertising. Company had 12 stores, franchisees had 9, so we had a vote. Company gets 12 votes, we get 9, we lose. So basically, we were at their mercy, and I knew that, but I knew that going in. Okay. All right, so will a firm allow passive ownership? And only 24 don't, so that means 76, or roughly 3/4, allow passive ownership. And the big thing with passive ownership, and I had a couple people that came to see me and asked questions, it's like you're an investor. You're not actually working in the business. Okay, I own stock in a bank here in town. I'm a passive owner or passive investor in that because I'm not involved in the day-to-day operation, so you're kind of at the whim of the people that are running the business. But the advantage, though, is it's a way to raise capital, and it's easier for that person who's already licensed to get multiple units, so they can, if they want to allow passive investing or people to invest in the business. So 75% do. Once again, it's just kind of a way to raise capital. A lot of wealthy individuals, doctors, lawyers, are they going to run franchise chains? No, but could they afford to hire somebody to do it? Sure. So it's just a way for people to invest money that are not actually running the business. Multi-unit owners tend to free ride less than owners of individual units because they have more at stake. If you've got 10 or 12 units of something, you're not going to try to just ride the system. You've got too much at stake. But like the example I gave you, if somebody's got 10 Subways here and you've got 1 and they want to run an advertising campaign, there's no reason for you to participate with them. You're going to get the benefits of it whether you participate or not. So most passively owned franchise are investment for wealthy individuals. So passive ownership reduces performance. Well, how is that? Well, the people that are actually own the business aren't working in it. So have you guys ever heard the term agency principle? You guys know that? That's what to me it describes. The agency principle says that someone who acts as an agent for a company will make decisions based on their best interest and not that of the company. Okay, so think about that. Someone acting as an agent for a company will make decisions based on their best interest and not that of the company. Does that make sense to you? You think that's true? If you're a manager for a place and you get a bonus based on sales and it's coming towards the end of the month, you think you're going to do whatever it takes to kick up sales even if it hurts profit a little bit? Yeah, it's human nature. We're going to look after ourselves first. What's the difference with the franchisee then? They're invested in the business long term, right? So making something this month I'm not necessarily going to care about that because I'm looking at it for the long term and I'm working it day to day. So that to me is why, and once again, I even mentioned when even franchises now that allow multi-unit and when you get 10 or 20, it's not a franchise anymore really. It is by structure, but by the actual business itself, you're going to have managers running the store, not owners. And so that's where you lose that performance of not having somebody in there. I guarantee you, do you think the store was run better when I was there than when I was not? Absolutely. And you think it's possible, and I had very good managers, but people just don't treat it like it's their own. You guys are employees. You guys treat your job like it's your business, or are there times when you go,
Yeah, I'm always invested in it. My job.
but we all still, that whole that whole shirking thing, we shirk. Well, that's it. But that owner, that's his livelihood. Well, I know, but you agreed to work for that.
Right. But the whole point is, why would I worry about, the business because it's not mine.
Okay, but that your comment goes exactly to the reason why franchising can be successful is because you want somebody in that business that cares about it for more than a paycheck. And I promise you, I did because my whole life was wrapped up in it. And when you put people in that situation, they're going to make it work. Versus wealthy investors, you know, certainly they don't want to lose money, but it's just not that big a deal to them. All right. Passive owners tend to treat their stores as investments, not jobs. Can create a hybrid arrangements where ownership is passive, but manager owns part of the operation. And that's the one I told you, like Firehouse. You can have a group of people, but one of the owners has to be involved in the day-to-day operation. I would, if I were going to set up one, I would want that. I would not want total passive ownership with just managers.
When you give this example, they basically have to have like a 15% equity in the company, or
Yeah.
that would suck. If you ever wanted to fire them, now you got to buy them out.
Well, and that's the problem with like small companies. When you start doing stock and partnership deals, there's all kinds of problems. And Dr. Osher Young, who was like head of JMI and pretty much started it, I can't tell you how many times I heard him say partnerships are the last thing you ever want to do. And especially when you get into stock and stuff like that.
You can't just give them like 10% of sales, 10% profit.
Technically, that's not ownership. If the rules say ownership, you've got to be 10% of the company. And then how do you value, the other thing that comes into play, how do you value stock in a private company? What's it worth? What somebody will pay. Same thing, I bought stock in this bank. If I went to them now and said, hey, I need my money, I really need to sell, what would I get for my stock? What somebody else would be willing to pay. And I have no idea what that is. There's no market, which is what's the value of publicly traded companies. You have a market to buy and sell at any time, and it's liquid. Private companies, it's not. So that's why that whole ownership thing is difficult.
So are there any instances of managers being paid like based on percentage of profit?
Sure. I mean,
I would assume that if you have like 20 stores, I would want manager to
my manager was I had a very good incentive package for them, and I hope they made a lot of money, because the more they made, the more I made. But it's still, let me give you this example. This is what hit me, and this is when I figured out that money's not it for everybody. When I sold my first 2 restaurants, I moved back to Tallahassee. I still had one going. And so I put that guy on a very nice incentive program. I mean, he had the potential, living in that small town, to make very decent money, and I had no problem doing that because I was so far away. I wanted him. But here's the problem. He was making enough salary to pay all his bills and live comfortably, so all that bonus meant nothing to him. So he ran the place in the ground. But for him, it was a job, and he goes and I got a Facebook request from him like 2 months ago. Delete? Kidding me? I just don't get it. But that's what I'm saying. You're right. You want to incentivize people so they work it like their own. LaDonna, my manager, she wanted to make money. But is money the most important thing for everybody? Are there people that as long as they make enough to get by, then they're going to be happy? And they're not going to do that extra. So I agree. I like incentives. You just got to be careful. It's just that not everybody's incentivized by the same thing. Okay. Don't allow passive ownership in a new franchise system. If you need outlet operators with strong ownership incentives, so it's saying build the brand first, and I agree with that. You want people working it in the early stages, but don't automatically reject passive ownerships. If you got a multi-unit situation, it can be a good deal for ownership.
I was wondering, does any franchise allow you the option of where you just put up the money and the corporate staffs it? Like, you treat it like
No. If they were going to do that, I mean, they might as well go public, raise money, and build it themselves. There's no incentive for the corporation to do that, really. Yeah, but if they're going to do that, they might as well do it themselves, because that's the hard part. Yeah. All right, so how do we control it? Written detailed contracts, and Mr. Bartolomeo was went into that some. You got to have tight control over the brand name. You got to specify franchisees' responsibilities, and I don't remember what number, but one of them was franchisors' obligations, and the next was franchisees' obligations. Procedures, equipment, maintenance, dress code, all that can be specified in that FDD. And McDonald's, and that's why I think I may have mentioned I had a student last semester who's had an uncle that was a McDonald's franchisee, and he just said it's not fun anymore. And look at this, McDonald's contracts tells you when and how to clean the floors, and even the cleaning solution to use. And when it's in that manual and you sign that manual, then that's what you will do. No option. Okay, contracts must specify consequences of not meeting, and that goes to the whole termination thing. But once again, termination is always the last thing they want to do, and can be a sticky legal matter if the franchisee doesn't want to give up the contract. All right, so reserving termination rights, the franchisor needs to establish its right at the end of the franchise agreement, take back the outlet, but it's got to be over specific behavior or not meeting specific clauses and rules and non-performance. You can't just take it back because you want to. So that's what you have to draw those lines in there and word that contract such that if people don't meet a minimum standard, then you can take action against them. But then what's going to be the deciding factor at the end of the day? No, the court of law. Okay, you're going to go to a court, and that court, what does a court do? They interpret that contract and say, look, the contract says that he was supposed to mop the floor at 3 o'clock. Well, he mopped it at 3:10. We don't see that big enough of a violation, so we're not going to uphold it. So that's the other thing, and that's why it's such a long process, because it's going to end up in the courts if you disagree. And then if it goes to court, what's the law? That contract. But it's still subject to interpretation by the judge or whoever. Okay, got to return the operating manual. That's, pretty common. And termination is a complex and often difficult legal process. I love what Tasty Freeze. You can buy the machine, and you have to buy the machine, but they lease you the pump to make the ice cream. So when your contract's up, or that lease, and I don't know what the terms of the lease, but if you don't have the pump, that machine's really worthless to you. So that's how they control their franchisees. All right, so they can control the source of supply. They limit the sources of raw materials. And they can only do that, though, with inputs that are proprietary to a system. So like napkins, stuff like that, they can't tell you who to use for generic stuff, but they can set specs that say your napkins have to be this thick. And then in that case, if you don't meet the specs, then you are in violation. So that's, once again, how specific you want that contract to be. But then they can provide you a list of approved suppliers and key specific product characteristics. Once again, what I found, the advantage of the franchise system was they have so much buying power that they make it to where it's not beneficial not to buy from them. I mean, my costs were so much less than I know what my competitor across the street was paying, simply because of the volume buying power. So that's one of the things that you probably want to buy as much stuff from the franchisee as you can. Okay, requiring exclusive dealing. It prevents franchisees from selling products of other companies. And like I told you, my guy up in Springfield wanted to have the little rack of tourist stuff for Branson. They made him take that out. They can pretty much tell you what you can do and not do. And also, one of the guys from Hardee's wanted to do a Sonic also, and in the contract it did not allow him to do it because they had language in there where you could not own a competing business. Once again, you need to know what's in that FDD. Okay, and maintain the right to purchase any outlet that a franchisee wants to sell. And once again, there's all kinds of issues in there. What's the price? And could you spell that out in the contract on how it was going to be determined? Well, what's one way to get a price? Market and get a third party. So when the guy and I agreed to a price, I had to go to Hardee's and go, hey, other franchisee is going to buy me out. Here's the contract. And they had to write a first refusal. But there's also, you could word in there that you could take a public valuation and have like two different people, and there's people that will do that based on your books, come in and value it. You could have that. So there's all different ways to set it, but you got it. At some point, you're going to have to determine a price. At the time that I've got that contract signed, then they have first right of refusal. But that's a signed contract. Yeah, no, because they're not going to play that game where you start leveraging them. But in most cases, I don't know, I know with like Hardee's, they didn't want any more stores. They were very happy with the franchise system. It was basically where it came into play was, I know sometimes there was one where a guy wanted to close one down because it wasn't profitable, and Hardee's was willing to take on that store at a little loss because they didn't want to lose their presence in the marketplace. So in that case, they bought the guy out. But they're not going to pay a premium for that for a place that's losing business either. All right, so ensuring payments of royalties, you try to make it difficult to underreport sales, and now with computer, I told you Dunkin' Donuts, and Pinch A Penny also, they have access remote to all his computer systems. So could you still do it? Yeah. I mean, it's not hard to do. I mean, a guy could sell a jug of chlorine and not ring it up, or a bucket and not ring it up. Now, I don't know how tight they're going to come in and audit and do inventory control saying that you bought X amount of chlorine, we only see this amount ring up, and we only see this amount here. But is it worth, once again, is it worth getting caught doing that? And if you can do it, your employees can do it. And that was a big fear I had. If I figured out a way to cheat the system, then all of a sudden I got employees who are not going to ring up stuff, put the money in their pocket, and you just don't want to get involved in that. So what's the way, and audit, once again, that's required. They're going to audit your books. But computerization and technology has made it a whole lot easier for them to be able to track what's happening. All right, so you provide franchisees with excess profits to make the franchisee so profitable that they have no reason to cheat. And that's what the guy from Pinch A Penny, I mean, he has nothing bad to say about that organization as far as their willingness to help him be successful. Unfortunately, some franchisors aren't like that. And that's what you don't want to get in a system where that franchisor is just trying to squeeze all the money they can out in sales and not worried about the profit of the franchisee. So minimizes the need to monitor, and you create that win-win. And what was his word? He said, what did Mr. Bartolomeo say, the relationship? He said, it's not like boss. He said, we are their partners. He said, I feel like I am a partner in that business. Okay, so you got to get very detailed contracts, make it so that your franchisees can make money, and that'll help not having to worry about them trying to skim money out. Very few, how long should the contract be? Very few franchisors offer contracts in perpetuity, meaning just as long as you want to do it. 91% offer the right to renew, and the average term is 10 years with an 8-year renewal. So what do you guys think? If you were going to do this, how long a contract would you want to sign? 3, 5 years? 5 to 10. A lot of it would depend on my initial investment. Think about a hotel. Is that expensive to do? Yeah. So wouldn't you want like a 15 or 20 to be able to amortize all your cost over that? If you're doing Molly Maids, what's your startup cost? Yeah, very little. So in that case, a 5-year I wouldn't be afraid of. But if I'm going to be doing a motel or something where I'm going to have a gymnasium, if you're going to invest in all this equipment and building and all that, I'm going to want at least 10 would be the minimum I would want. And once again, you're locked in, but that's good and bad. And I signed a 20, but what was the positive of that? For 20 years, they can't raise my royalty. They can't adjust anything in there. If you sign that 5, at the end of 5, you're going to have to renew another 5, and what can they do? They can raise royalties, make you sign in a lot of cases, you have to pay a re-signing fee, which may be a percentage of so much per year or something. So there's advantages and disadvantages to the length of that contract. But the average is 10 years, and the average renewal is 8.
Like 10-year option, 10-year with a second 10-year option. That also associated with
most of the time, they charge you some kind of fee when you renew, a renewal fee. And part of it, I understand it's administrative. You got to sign it, got to do all this stuff. But part of it is just, if you've gone through 10 years and you're going to want to renew, they're going to guess that you're profitable, so they're going to take a little money. Once again, it's in the FDD, and I'll try to check maybe my Hardee's FDD and see what the renewal was. I mean, 20 years, was so far down the road, wasn't really worried about it. But I know when the guy bought me out, he had to pay some kind of fee too. There was a transfer fee. I would probably want that. I would just be worried that if I invest $2 million in something and then in 5 years, all of a sudden, for whatever reason, they decide they don't want to renew me, that would worry me a little bit if I had a large investment.
What if, like, in your case, you said that building was yours, land is not?
No. I own the land and building. What I said was I own the land in my name personally, and we leased it to the corporation. It was just an accounting thing.
Say your contract is over after 10 years, franchising, you're still paying like money for that land and that building. You, like, is there some sort of like after that 10 years, if you create your own, if you wanted to start your own Red Elephant or something, you wanted to create your own restaurant?
Yeah. I think the guy down here at remember Buffalo Wild Wings that was down here on Tennessee Street? Okay, all of a sudden it's not Buffalo Wild Wings, it's Varsity or something. I think, and I'm not absolutely sure, but if I had to guess, what happened was his license agreement expired, and he said, well, I know where I can get my food. I've got, all this stuff. So as long as he didn't portray anything to be Buffalo Wild Wings, then he went out on his own, didn't pay the royalty, didn't pay the franchise fee, and evidently in his mind, he didn't see the advantage of paying that extra money anymore. And I know it's already changed names like 2 times, so, and there's already another Buffalo Wild Wings in town. So, yeah, you can do that. If you own that building, and once that license agreement's expired, but you got to take the Hardy sign down, you got to take all their... It would be, because all that stuff, all like the menu strips and all that, you get all that from them. You would have to go out and have all that stuff made individually, and it would be quite a transition to go from, even though I guess the equipment you would have there, but then you got to develop the menu and, yeah, but can you do it? Sure.
Is that the place that you're staying in? Is that prime time or is that somewhere else?
Is that at prime time now? It was Varsity right after it was Buffalo Wild Wings, right? And it's prime time now?
Yeah, it's got pretty good food still.
Is it still? But see, if you can buy, like with me, I got all my stuff from 90% of my stuff from Hardee's. So I would have had a hard time. If he's buying his stuff locally from like Cisco and those places and Buffalo Wild Wings didn't have a distribution system, then yeah, you're going to be paying the same price unless they had a pricing agreement worked out. And that's all the stuff you don't know.
The guy who owns Prime Timer now, he also owns California Chicken Bill.
Okay.
So, I think.
Do you know if he was was he the BW3?
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay. I just wonder, because when I saw that happen, when it went from Buffalo Wild Wing, which I knew was a franchise, to something else, I was very curious why that happened. Because I thought the Buffalo Wild Wing did a pretty good job, and once again, it's already been on its second name, so I'm guessing, there was a transition there, and he tried to do it on his own.
Just being curious, what didn't you buy?
I bought a lot of my produce local. I lived in South Arkansas where tomatoes were that was a lot of the people on the side grew tomatoes. So I bought my tomatoes, some of the dairy products that maybe milk, but that was mainly it. It was just plus the other thing is, if you start buying from multiple vendors, you got people in and out your store, your accounting's a lot harder. I got a truck 2 times a week with, 90-95% of my stuff. But once again, I just like, especially in a small town, the more business you can do locally. But I didn't even have to buy food or stuff from them. As long as I spent my money locally, it's this reciprocal thing that happens in a small town. You do business, people do business with their customers. So, all right. So longer term offers better opportunity for franchisees to amortize their investments. You guys know what the word amortize means? Like to spread out over. So if I've got a $40,000 franchise fee and a 20-year term, so that's basically $2,000 a year. If you broke it down, that light franchise fee would cost me. And once again, you can write that off too. Each year you're able to deduct part of that. Better chance for the franchisee to sell the outlet if desired, if you have the longer terms. But once again, they're going to make whoever buys it. In most cases, you cannot assume that contract, meaning you can't take over. When the guy bought me out, they made him sign a new contract. And in our case, Carl's Jr.'s had bought out Hardy, so he had to sign the new Carl's contract, which was much worse than the Hardy's contract I signed. Much more strict. More assurance for the franchisee that the franchisor will not engage in extortion because you're in it for the long haul, and then less incentive for franchise to cheat free ride because I've got a 20-year contract. All right, longer term, the negative side, though, it creates difficulty in changing key elements such as the royalty rate. It's problematic if you get poor franchisees. Now you're stuck with that guy for 20 years. And then problems with outlets looking dated and stale. But I don't see that as a problem. How do you address that? The problems, the guy's got a 20-year contract and his outlet starts looking dated and stale. You put that in the contract, okay? You can handle that in that contract, saying at our discretion, we come in and say you need to upgrade some of your stuff, then you have to do that. And Hardy's told me up front, you need to plan every 5 to 7 to 8 years to redo some of your, like your seating and all, because you guys go in places and the seats are ripped, and it just wears out over time. Same with motels, and I know some like apartments in town, after some point, you can put all the paint on it you want, and some of these places that were here when I was here, no, like the Plaza over here and those places, guys, those were here when I was here and they were old. And there's only so much you can do. But here's what McDonald's does or did. Anybody remember, it was several years ago, the old McDonald's up on Thomasville Road, North Thomasville? They came in and just leveled the building and built a new one.
They still have like that old Whataburger down there too, old style.
Yeah. Well, Whataburger's a little different because there's not indoor seating, is there? Isn't it all car hop and? Is there? Okay. With the car hop thing, that's a lot. It's like Sonic. It's a lot easier because you don't have that dining room presence. It's all in your speakers and all, but still, you need to paint the poles and paint the ceiling occasionally. Stuff just gets. I would think.
Possibly more, but like maintenance be less. You don't buy like massive.
I would think less, and to me, I would have, and I don't know. I think I told you guys I did approximately 65% of my business. I did through that drive-through. I would have loved to have done about 80% through that drive-through. Think about what's the advantage of that. Once that customer comes and you get them, they're gone. Okay, and I used to have all the coffee crowd and the people that would sit in there, and I have to go clean up after them, and it's easier to me with that. Plus, you don't have to heat and cool. Think about your utility bill. You have a small kitchen area versus heating and cooling this large dining room. I think it's much more efficient to be able to do that.
Like McDonald's decided, like, hey, just screw the dining, just do it that way. Think they'd make more money?
Well, McDonald's is a different market, though, because you got the whole kid thing and the whole playground thing. And where they've struggled, though, is they've struggled with adults. So what have they tried to do? What's McDonald's? They've always struggled with adults. What have they tried to do to reach, like, older crowds now? The coffee, right? They've done the gourmet, tried to do the coffee, plus the whole Wi-Fi thing. I mean, face it, people, it's cool to go sit in Starbucks, isn't it?
Make it look modern.
Yeah, I mean, people go spend $4 for coffee and sit in Starbucks. Do people do that at McDonald's? No, because nobody wants to be seen sitting in a McDonald's. They have an image problem with older, but if you had to say what's their target market? Yeah, they guarantee you more kids drag people into McDonald's than parents just going in. And they spend so much money on advertising. Watch their advertising sometime. A lot of it's designed at kids. And they spend a lot of money on their like toys, Happy Meal toys and all, because when you do a Disney something, you have to get that license. But they spend the money because they know it draws the people.
I read in my Law Society class that McDonald's purposely had smaller seats that are uncomfortable to turn over.
I don't doubt it.
I mean, that's just crazy. I mean, they go that far.
Well, I mean, how many times do you ever see McDonald's full, though?
They're gonna strip at 2 a.m.
No. Nope. Nor will I. I will take your word on that. I can tell you that. Not going to be an issue. All right. So don't use short-term contracts if you want the franchise to invest heavily in their outlets. Okay. Once again, you invest for the long haul, but don't use long-term if you're uncertain that your policies and fees are the right policies and fees. Your system may die before you can make changes. So maybe in a young franchise, you may want that short-term. And there's something else you can do. And let me see if it's in here. If not, I'll tell you. Okay, national advertising, vital to building the brand name. 72% of franchisors charge a national advertising fee. Lodging, 78%. That makes sense because of our interstate system and travel now. That lodging business is perfect for franchising to get that brand name out. Auto repair, 39%. Fast food restaurants, a very, very high percent do national advertising, unless they're large regional chains. And most base it on a percentage of sales. 5% charge a flat rate. Why do you think percentage of sales is much more popular than flat rate? Yeah, it's fair. Okay? If you're not doing much business, that flat rate could kill you. If everybody's got to pay $500, that may be a small percentage of some people's sales, somebody who's not doing a lot of business, so you pay according to your sales. And that's, to me, the most fair way to do it, and 95% of the people do that. Yeah. National advertising funds must be set up as trust and kept separate from royalties, and small chains are rarely charge this fee but put a trigger into contract, okay? Once again, you guys know what a trigger means? Right. So if you're in a small franchise and they've got 30 stores, but there may be something in your contract that says when we open our 50th store, we will then require you to pay a 2% into a national advertising fund. Okay, that's a trigger, and so it's not now. And once again, why don't young firms need to have national advertising?
They don't expect to grow like that. Young.
Yeah, and when you do nationally, when you advertise on ESPN or some of those, that's very expensive. Well, if you only have stores in the Southeast, is it worth paying that money just to reach that regional market? No. McDonald's case, it makes sense. Subway, it makes sense because they're all over the United States. So in smaller chains, your money can be more efficiently spent on the local level. This is that Subway gains control of $600 million advertising trust fund. Subway President Fred DeLuca scored a big victory this month, regaining control of the Subway's franchisee advertising fund trust. In the case, a federal judge issued a written decision that the parent company had the right to make changes to its franchise agreements in a manner that enables it to divert funds from the trust and direct them into a new advertising trust fund. I just find that ruling concerning, that a judge would allow that parent company to redirect money, but it goes over control. Who controls what we're going to do with advertising? And that, I mean, once again, if you guys were going to do Subway, I would try to get a very, very good feel for who controls this advertising. That's a huge part. And if they're going to run these sales, and on a $5 sub, I'm guessing they can make some money, and there's a certain thing where certainly more business, people lower price sometimes to do more business, but at some time, if your margin's not high enough to cover your overhead, then it's going to be counterproductive. Is that when they're doing that January, Jan-U-all or whatever they're saying? Isn't that, wasn't it something the whole month of January? All their subs $5?
Yeah, you saw McDonald's come back the 49-cent hamburger.
Yeah, McDonald's is bringing back the 49-cent hamburger. And I don't know what their cost is. What would you think? Probably, it's got to be at least 25 or 30 cents and then with your labor. And think about it now. Your labor cost back in the day when they were selling that was $4.25, $5 an hour. Your labor cost now is well over $8 an hour, if not even higher. Well, what the hope is when that happens, they're hoping that people buy fries and a drink and some of that other stuff with it. You just go and buy a sack of 49-cent burgers, you're beating the system. But that's what. Well, that's their fries, and that's the thing. And knowing the business, the French fries, potato cost is one of the cheapest costs that you have. Soda cost. Why are they selling those sodas for $1? Yeah, the margins are very, very good. But look at what are you paying for, like at Wendy's or something, for a 32-ounce soda now? Almost $2. Isn't that? Yeah, $1.80, 79, 89, and that is very, very high margin. But I will say, I was buying my soda, my syrup back in the day for like $30, $31, $32 for one of those bags. I've seen it at Sam's now at $60. So it's gone up, but that's 20 years. It's doubled. So.
How many? Rough estimate. How many 16-ounce cups does that bag?
Isn't it a concentrate though? Like it's heavily concentrated?
No, you bricks it. You can set the mix. Yeah, how strong it is.
Is that what McDonald's has the best Coke?
I mean, you can set. It's called brixing it. The amount of syrup that goes in there. Yeah, but how many cups? Yeah, you can pump a lot of soda, but there's also CO2 and water that goes in there too. So yeah, carbonated water mixed with that syrup is what creates the soap, and so that carbonated water. But you also have to buy carbonation. And there's a company, CO2. It used to be you used to have to buy the tanks, but now they have. I don't know if you guys have seen the big truck, and I had it put in. They put an outlet through your wall, and so that truck you got a huge tank, and so the guy just comes in from outside and fills up your tank, and you don't have to change out tanks. You guys ever got a soda that was not carbonated? That's because in the old days those tanks ran out. Now you have this one big tank, and the guy it was great. Nucor was the name of the company. They were out of Florida, but they drilled a hole in my wall, ran a line out there, and that company would just come from the outside and keep my tank filled. I never had to order anything. They would just come do it. They knew how often it would last, and it was great.
When you had your store, did it go through Coke?
I did Coke, and some companies you get a choice. Some have contracts. In my case, I got to choose, so I negotiated. I was able to negotiate with Pepsi and Coke and figure out who I was kind of getting the best deal from. So yeah, I did have that freedom. Some don't.
How do you know when to replace the syrup? Because I went the other day to Taco Bell and I just got syrup.
Well, I mean that's when and that's the other drawback of a drive-through. If somebody's paying attention though, if you're watching that, when it comes out clear, you're out of syrup, unless it's Sprite. Nah, it's visual. I mean, you can look at it and see. But the hardest one in the drive-thru was Sprite, because you could never tell when that was out. Somebody had to taste it to be able to tell because it was clear. All right, National Advertising Fund set up triggers. We got that.
I feel like people don't even make those drinks. How when I go to like a McDonald's drive-thru, they have like a machine that does everything. They don't even look at it.
Nope. And we had that. I had that back in my day too. Yeah. And same thing. The big controversy when I was there, and who does it now? Most of them have the soda out in the lobby where you can make your own. And I fought it for a little bit, but then I did go with that. And they convinced me that the labor you save by having people do their own drinks makes up more than for the free refills and all the kind of stuff. So it's kind of a trade-off. Many franchisors require local advertising. Mine was 1% that I had to spend locally, and many franchisors use cooperative. And once again, with Hardee's, I paid 3.5% to cooperative, which was the state of Arkansas, and that was my main fund. 1% local, 1% national. Hardee's at the time, and I don't know if they've changed because they are larger now. Now that they integrated with Carl's, they are pretty much nationwide, so they may do more national. But the bulk of mine was spent in the region. And then once again, I never got audited on my local. But the good thing about local advertising, you can assign at the football field an ad in a yearbook. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff you can do that you can show as being local advertising. So it was pretty easy. All right, so lessons, national advertising is important for large change, and then local advertising is important when the, local advertising is more important when the chain is small and new. All right, so this goes back to kind of what we said on should it be long-term, short-term. So if you have a long-term lenient contract, reduce fear of franchisor opportunism because you're locked in for a long period of time, so you don't have to worry about them. They can't change that agreement. But little control if it's lenient. Long-term, strict, reduce fear, but tight control. Short-term, fear of franchisor opportunism. My contract runs out. Are they going to renew me with a different contract? And little control. And then short-term, strict, fear of franchisor opportunism, but tight control. So, and guys, control in some cases is not bad because keep in mind, you're not the only one with that name, and you want everybody else out there that has that name to run a good operation too, because if not, it can hurt your business. So that's why I was never really afraid of controls because the brand name's got to be protected because more people share it. All right, so creating effective policies is essential to making it succeed. The franchisor must have rules, choose the right mechanism to make sure that franchisees are acting in the best interest. The best way to do that is make it so they can be profitable and devise correct terms for the franchise agreement. Once again, I would base that on how much initial investment is. The more the initial investment, longer the terms I would probably look at. And then create appropriate policies for national and local advertising. Where are we going to spend the money? How much are you going to make them spend? And is national appropriate? Is regional more appropriate? Or can we get by with local? That's it. Okay, don't forget, if anybody wants to work with somebody in a group, get it to me, and then on Tuesday, bring a laptop, and we'll start do some research on your paper.